Psychosophy is the foundation of this channel, but I have strayed from it. This video has been mapped out in my head since like 2024, but I've kept holding it off in favor of more exciting and new content, but now I'm returning to my roots. The main intention behind this video is to atone for my sins in a way. My first video on PUI was around 9 months ago, and my knowledge on the system and typology as a whole keeps growing and growing. My knowledge compared to then and now is completely day and night. To be honest, I've spouted so much misinformation in these 4 videos. My latest one was fine, but as you go further back, the information gets more and more incorrect. This video in particular will be to explore psychosophy as a typology system and a psychological theory. I'll go more in depth, not on the placements, but on the nitty-gritty of this complicated, yet rewarding once you learn it, system. Enjoy. Before I begin, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to like and subscribe. I am not above external validation. How these videos perform will heavily influence how many I produce. So if you like the video, then like the video. Not to be confused with Alexander Afanasyev, the Russian folklore novelist from the 1800s. Alexander Y. Afanasyev is the author of the book Syntax of Love. I really do wish this guy had more information on him for a short biography. In fact, I wrote paragraphs upon paragraphs about this guy only to realize I was writing about the wrong Alex. Embarrassing on my part, I just wish I could give this guy more credit for the system he's crafted. I spent centuries trying to find a sliver of info on him, but I've gotten nothing. Anyways, his book Syntax of Love is a psychological typology system with an emphasis on philosophy. Psychological typology meaning the study or classification of people into types or categories based on their psychology. It's best compared to Mbti, which I hate and sounds like a slap in the face to Afanasyev. The similarities end with the fact that they are both systems and classify people and use letters. But I'd like to think that Psychosophy provides a deeper level of analysis of psychoanalysis that Mbti couldn't dare to reach. Alex wrote about what is believed to be the 4 facets or aspects of human existence: volition, emotion, physics, and logic. Volition relating to willpower and determination, emotion relating to your moods and expressions, physics relating to your body and its relation to the external environment, and logic relating to opinion formation and rationale, spirit, soul, body, and mind respectively. Now for an explanation of how the system works. Pretend you have 4 spaces. Of course, each space being suited for each of the aforementioned aspects. Volition, which will always be written as V, emotion, which will be written as E, physics being written as F for some reason, and logic being written as L. It's not like Mbti where each space is solely for a specific aspect. The first space isn't solely determining introversion or extroversion. What the spaces represent is far more complex. I prefer to call these spaces functions. Each function has a specific definition and purpose, and each aspect is made to fit a specific function. But where these aspects are placed depends only on you and your psyche. Think of it as a 4-piece puzzle. Once you use a piece, it's gone and now a part of the puzzle. Once the puzzle is complete, you get assigned one of the 24 PY types. I do plan to eventually cover each PY type, but knowing me, that'll take a while. I'll link some sources covering each type in the description. I figured breaking down what is deemed to be the 4 facets of being was the best way to begin the video. First, with volition.
Hear this. I'm not only Kira, but I am also God of the New World.
Volition is undeniably the most important aspect to PY. It's my favorite and probably the most interesting one. Because of its significance, you can use willpower as a typing system alone. First volition, second volition, third volition, and fourth volition will most of the time result in a drastically different character. And to think about it, we've never seen will described by many psychologists like it's explained in Syntax of Love. It really does provide the groundwork for your personality, and volition will heavily influence how your other placements manifest. It's the driving force that influences the manifestation of other functions in your type. Volition could be described as your driving force and sometimes the way and your ability to get things done. Not so much productivity, but more so the motivation behind your actions and your relationship with power. To define the aspect, it's associated with yourself, self-worth, will, and fortitude. The different functions will describe your ability to imagine yourself as having an impact on the world. Volition not only relates to willpower, but also where you place yourself on the hierarchy. Do you see yourself at the bottom or the top, or somewhere in between?
I'm fine. He picked me, Mommy. Do you hear me? I'm gonna be the new Swan Queen.
The word emotion does sound self-explanatory of the aspect, and yes, it probably means what you think it means. But allow me to elaborate. It's the aspect most heavily related to the soul. I like to think of it as a part of the psyche that's impossible to locate. To me, volition is your aura, physics is your body, and logic belongs to the brain. Emotion wouldn't necessarily come from the heart, but from a distant plane of passion and sentiments. Although it can be, emotion doesn't just discuss crying or joy, but how you perceive these feelings. Your inner feelings and worries, moods, emotional reactions, the richness of your emotional palette, how you perceive in your emotions and emotions of others. The ability and or desire to manage/control and express moods, yours and other people's, aesthetic and artistic tastes. The function in which the aspect of emotion lies can indicate the depth of your emotional world. How much importance and value do you attach to feeling and expression? What is your relationship with ethos and romanticism?
You come rain or come shine, it's one of those things. I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna love you.
If you haven't already gathered, physics and syntax of love has nothing to do with a branch of science. It simply relates to anything of the physical realm. The aspect of physics likely has the broadest range of matters it explores. Physics could relate to your body, its pleasures and sensations, your personal sense of comfort, your activity level, aesthetics of the body and environment, appearance, health, money, finances, material acquisitions, and overall, your relationship with your body. How do you maintain and perceive your body, material, and external environment?
It's not like I wanted to do it. I just did what was needed to convince the Marlians that I was loyal to them. If they'd learned the truth, I never could have brought hope to this island. None of this is new to you, though. I told you guys the exact same thing when I first got here.
You need to pretend I'm screaming this at the top of my lungs. Logic and its placements are not associated with IQ and the quality of your intelligence. Being first to logic does not make you smarter than a user of the fourth logic. Again, the function's purpose are extremely important. Besides, psychosophy is about how you perceive these aspects, not necessarily how strong or weak they are. Logic indicates why and how you process information and opinions. Logic is concerned with the world of ideas, reasoning, data, and categorization. Everything that is a product of the activity of the human mind, regardless of whether they have material embodiment or not. Completeness of thoughts, attitude towards the incoming information and its validity, how you value the pursuit of the truth, desire, or lack thereof, for discussions, the ability to mentally see the essence of things, and the cause and effect relationships between them. I must emphasize that these functions are not a measure of the quality for each aspect. People believe logic placements are a gauge of intelligence. For instance, first logic will always be smarter than third logic. This way of thinking is entirely incorrect and a complete misinterpretation of the system. Each space or function has a specific meaning. Simplified, your first function is confident, your second is flexible, your third is insecure, and your fourth is neglected. But allow me to go further into depth. Confidence in the first function doesn't imply arrogance or assertiveness. It refers to an aspect you can depend and rely on. I am confident in my first placement. The first function is your tool, which you'll call upon first. It's characterized by confidence and independence. You aren't likely to take input in this space. You're to think you know best. This creates a stubborn attitude regarding the aspect occupying this function. The inherent stubbornness of the first function creates a certain selfishness. Not much care is shown for others' relationship to the aspect, or at least your relationship to the aspect is prioritized. Describing this function as a tool entails a reliance on it when all else fails. You'll view it and put effort into keeping it stable and consistent. Think of it as your static and dependable best friend you can confide in, instead of your dynamic and inconsistent secondary friends. This tool can be thought of as a weapon, but also one of perception. I'm providing this solely as an example. This isn't to be taken literally. Let's say 4 people wielding different first placements saw a duck swimming with its ducklings. A user of the first volition may notice the power dynamic in which the way the small creatures follow the leader, compared to a user of the first emotion which may notice the sentiment, observing the connection the animals built. Again, don't use this for typing, it's just meant to demonstrate how the first function influences your perception of the world around you. The first function can never be thought of as flexible. Any intrusion or attempted manipulation of this placement will likely be met with defiance.
その燻製は冬の美人じゃバカ者が
Because of its overuse, you'll sometimes be unaware of its process. Think of it as your brain. The brain is literally of the utmost importance to your existence. As a result of its habitual use in your daily life, you're likely not to be aware your brain is controlling you. You probably won't often think about this function. This is the relationship between you and the first function. The second function can be just as strong or stronger than the first function. It differs from the first function in its flexibility. While the first function is hidden from its user, the second is active. Even though both placements could be described as strong, they oppose each other in every other way. The first is static and rigid. The second is dynamic and pliable. The first placement is selfish, the second is encouraging of others. Second placements are balanced, without excess and without scarcity. It's marked by a performative nature. Not to imply that this function is staged or fake, but it has an emphasis on others and their reaction. This space in your type will have the desire to influence others and build them up. This will be the way you connect to others and encourage them.
And doubt is a luxury we can't afford anymore, sweetie. You have more power than you realize. Don't think. And don't worry. If the time comes, you'll know what to do. It's in your blood.
Its completion is met with an audience or a partner. While the first placement can go unnoticed by its user, the user of the second placement is actively aware of its use. The first function can be relied on for comfort, while the second function is relied on for enjoyment and merriment. Obviously, the third function is not a strength, but a weakness. The third function can still be trained and the insecurity can fade. But everyone has a weakness, a sore spot on the human psyche. It's a function that we ourselves consider vulnerable, flawed, underdeveloped, an obstacle, and in need of constant strengthening. Even if this placement was trained through self-improvement, it'll still be your spot of inferiority and weakness. Vulnerability and therefore hypersensitivity are hallmarks of these placements. Attacks against the third function aren't taken lightly. Because of the inherent weakness of this function, blows against it will be detrimental. Though, overcompensation can form a defense against its inherent weakness. It depends on the different types and manifestations, but the usual goal is to fortify your third placement. You'll basically put effort into making your third placement's weakness less apparent. Overcompensation can come in the form of aggression, defensiveness, effort, or neurotic protection.
Raven, you should have seen the look on your face. You mean this look? No, that's more angry than scared.
It's only natural to guard ourselves from our scars and deficiencies. The third function is hyper-aware of any dangers against it. The placement is pessimistic and spends time anticipating harm. The aspect occupying this function will be vulnerable to attacks as well as praise and flattery. This leads the space to be in search of validation in an attempt to nullify its weaknesses. The fourth function is described as unbothered, but this isn't to be taken literally. One can't simply be completely unbothered regarding volition, for example. Remember, these are the 4 facets of human existence. You'd find it impossible for someone to entirely disregard an aspect to the point of non-existence. The fourth function is simply indifferent. The use or activity of this placement will be only to produce a product, a means to an end. The wielder may only use it to satisfy their higher, more valued functions.
キラにたどり着くか。
競争ですね。
どうせ行き着くところは同じだ。そこで先に待っている。
はい。
Finally, the fourth function is very dependent and easily subordinates itself to other functions higher in the hierarchy. Given its weakness, you won't feel comfortable asserting it towards the external environment. The fourth function is a slave without guile, a chameleon and a dependent with a large, but more often dormant potential. Now, as an extension of the idea of functions, Afanasyev brought forth the idea of dichotomies. While not entirely crucial to understanding the system, it provides much needed clarity on it, and actually makes typing easier. Dichotomies are essentially paired functions that share similar properties. The dichotomies I'll discuss are resultative/unconscious versus processional/conscious, and rigid versus adaptable. There's one more dichotomy being strong versus weak, but it's pretty self-explanatory and hasn't helped me much in understanding the system. To briefly explain it, your strong dichotomy belongs to your first and second function, and your weak dichotomy belongs to your third and fourth function. Now, starting with resultative/unconscious versus processional/conscious. These dichotomies discuss your relationship between your first and fourth functions versus your second and third functions. Basically your outer versus inner placements. And clearly this dichotomy is split into two parts, so I'll start with discussing resultative/processional. Your first and fourth functions are resultative, which means you'll utilize them in the interest of producing a product. You won't dwell on it for enjoyment, unless enjoyment is the end product. For example, first and fourth physics may work out for the end result, health or desired body, not for the enjoyment of physical exertion.
For those 3 hours she spent getting ready, she only thought about one thing.
Resultative placements are also unconscious, meaning there's no unnecessary attention targeted towards its development. This is a complex idea to convey, because yes, there is attention drawn to the resultative placements, especially the first function, but the attention drawn to it will be instinctive, essentially making it unconscious. First volition is attuned to the hierarchy, so as a result, they won't spend time pondering their goals, they'll just go out and do them. In contrast, processional functions, your second and third functions, will engage in the aspects used for the enjoyment of the process, or at least special attention will be drawn towards the process. Your use of these placements will reflect an attention on the formation of that aspect. There is obviously a greater value in the process rather than the result. For example, second and third emotion won't express freely like the resultative first and fourth emotions. Consciousness of the emotional aspect will cause their expression to be deliberate and intentional. They'll then enjoy the process of emotions, being the dialogue regarding their emotional landscapes. Now, onto the rigid versus adaptable dichotomy. This dichotomy covers the relationship between your first and third functions versus your second and fourth. To help you visualize, in the PY puzzle, imagine every other space being matched. Rigidity is a result of the confidence of the first function and the insecurity of the third. Rigidity implies an inherent aggression in laying down the aspect's principles. First and third placements won't take kindly to intrusions. There is a need to keep things particular and static. For example, first and third will are aimed at achieving their own goals. They are not interested in motivating or supporting someone else to achieve their own ambitions. This will make them especially neurotic regarding their own volitional spheres. Adaptability comes from the flexibility of the second function and the indifference of the fourth function. Adaptability allows these placements to be open to influence and input. Second and fourth functions are also able to change and alter the aspect to connect or adapt to their environment. There's simply no strong attachment to the behavior of the aspect. For example, users of the second and fourth logic are anything but stuck in their opinion. They can openly receive and consider it. Flexibility is also shown in the way they're able to answer maybes and possibilities, not necessarily seeking a concrete answer. So again, this video was meant to be a general explanation of the system. This includes each placement, but I did technically cover each one before. So instead, I'll be giving a condensed summary of each Psychosophy placement. First will is someone confident in their place in the world. They desire freedom first and foremost. the freedom to achieve their goals and take what's theirs. They see a desire and they chase it. They are strong-minded and independent. They don't concern themselves with the obstacles that approach them in their quest to get what they want. Their title of the Tsar, meaning king, means in the hierarchy, they'll take their place at the top. This isn't the type that feels that they have to fight their way up to the top. They know they're at the top and have nothing to prove. When volition comes into contact with the first function, it results in an individual who's confident, stubborn, and ambitious. Second volition is someone who doesn't concern themselves with the ideas of hierarchy and power. They are balanced people who tend to be egalitarian, believing everyone to belong on equal footing. This is a person who will consider what others want before taking any action. They may naturally take the position of a helper or a cheerleader. 2V is noted to find a genuine interest in helping others. They have strong resolve and determination, but their drive is less bullheaded than the first will. When volition merges with the second function, it creates a character who's benevolent, genuine, and diplomatic. Third will is tragically marked with a general insecurity in their place in the world. While the other volitional placements will place themselves at the bottom or top of the hierarchy, the 3V will manifest differently. Because of the insecurity of the third function, they strive to realize and raise their status in society, often comparing themselves to others and seeking validation in the process. They fluctuate between feeling at the top of the world and feeling at the bottom. They go from, I'm the best, I'm a king, to, I'm the worst and a loser. They have a lot of ambition, yet have a lot of doubts about themselves. These types may make excuses or blame others to protect their pride. Volition intertwined with the third function creates an emotionally volatile, competitive, and insecure individual. This type isn't necessarily unbothered with the aspect of volition. Willpower is important, it bleeds into other aspects of daily life. But often, fourth volition will only prioritize willpower when it comes to the acquisition and attainment of things that would satisfy their other placements. For example, an owner of the fourth will in first physics may exhibit extra perseverance to obtain material resources like money, food, or physical comfort. Or someone whose fourth will in third logic may work extra hard academically. This can make them appear driven and motivated to succeed in general, when in reality, they're just working hard to quell their intellectual insecurity brought along with the insecure third logic. Volition is impossible to completely ignore. The serf will just put volition on the back burner until it comes to satisfying their other placements. 4V places themselves at the bottom of the hierarchy. However, this doesn't mean they're insecure or view themselves as worthless. This just means they imagine themselves as having a low impact on their environment. The self-perception of the fourth will implies, some people are more important than I. My needs aren't as important as others. I need something or someone to push me to accomplish my goals. A user of the fourth volition tends to be relaxed, humble, and passive. First emotion is known to have the clearest visible manifestations. They're marked with happy and sad tears and an artistic spirit. 1E values the sentiments, feelings, and connections that come from life. Titled the romantic, they sometimes over-romanticize experiences, leading them to be dramatic. The romantic is confident in their emotional sphere and expression. The over-romanticism of this type reflects the selfishness of the first function in the way they prioritize their emotions more than others. They often take on the appearance of someone who wants to connect with others on an emotional level, but their emotions towards your emotions will matter first and foremost. 1E likes to feel strong emotions, to experience them within themselves. They live in their own world, which can be either magical and beautiful or tragic and bleak. The romantic is made to be an emotional, artistic, and expressive character. The balance of the second function is seen in the way that 2E controls their emotional expressions. Second emotion adapts their emotions to the environment. They seem to express not too much and not too little. This ability leads this type to be called the actor. The actor is able to adapt to the mood of the room and give a convincing performance. Because of this, second emotion is known to be charming and sociable. Being in the supportive second function, 2E will enjoy being part of others' emotional manifestations, often wanting to help others express themselves. Emotion is seen as a way to connect with others. The aspect of emotion plus the second function will result in a warm, empathetic, and animated soul. Third emotion is someone deeply afraid of true, unfiltered emotional expression. Insecurity manifests as vulnerability and sensitivity. Ironically, these types spend so much time and energy appearing emotionally impervious that they end up being hyper-aware of their own emotional spheres. This leads them to be conscious of any possible harm against the emotional aspect. Third emotion actually has a deep inner world, but this is hidden from others out of fear of being judged, criticized, and perceived. They prefer to deal with their struggles alone. Emotion combined with the third placement will yield an aloof, distant, and stoic character. Being in the unbothered function, the fourth emotion will hold a general disinterest in emotional depth and expression. Oftentimes, emotions are just to produce or gain a result. Otherwise, they are useless. They won't spend time exploring their inner worlds, often resulting in a lack of self-awareness. Fourth emotion has the ability to express emotions freely, but they do not hold any significance for the deeper reason or motivation behind their feelings. Titled the onlooker, 4E will be an observer and adapter of emotions, rather than an active participant. The onlooker is tough, grounded, and practical. Dubbed the owner, First Physics is known to be possessive and confident in its physical resources. Whether it be food, money, or materials, 1F clings to the physical world with a certain level of greed. 1F values the pleasure of sensory experiences and activities. They may eat for a full belly, shop for the vanity, or have sex for the thrill. They are confident in the decisions made in this aspect. Changes or interferences are met with aggression. 1F doesn't want to be told what to wear, what to eat, or how to sleep. First Physics is resilient in the face of physical pain, but at the same time is motivated by comfort, which may make them appear lazy. In short, 1F is pleasure-seeking, physical, and avaricious. Belonging to the second function will make the second physics strong with a willingness to support others. They may prepare a meal or give advice on aesthetics as a way to connect with others. They're known to be interested in the physical developments of others and enjoy engaging with them on that level. Conversations about taste, sensations, and routines are common. 2F views the aspect of physics as something to be curated and developed. This motivates them to be clean and healthy individuals. This type is called the toiler because they're often tireless when it comes to hard work, specifically physical labor. This creates a dynamic, active, and thick-skinned individual. Insecurity in the physical realm doesn't equal an insecurity in your appearance necessarily. Third Physics has a troubling relationship with anything physical. Known as the prude, 3F can be set off by the vile and revolting. They can be judgmental of others' poor physical conditions and envious of others' superior physical conditions. These types are known to be sensitive to pain and hurt. They're known to be hypochondriacs with a fear of illness and discomfort. But despite their fear of discomfort, they don't necessarily seek comfort. They're more driven by the need to compensate for the fear the physics aspect brings them. Because of the third function's inherent weakness, they're especially susceptible to trends in the opinions of others about the physical realm. Physics intertwined with the third function results in a character who's skittish, tidy, and physically sensitive. Fourth Physics doesn't care to obsess over things such as money, food, clothes, or material needs. This doesn't mean they can't value the physical world, but being in the fourth function, they're disinterested unless it yields a result. The physical world is an opportunity to realize the higher functions. Not to say they're unkempt, but they aren't the kind to spend hours on their appearance. 4F is struck with indifference. Because of this, they are easy to influence. In sex, they may adapt to their partner's needs. They aren't known to hold specific tastes that clash with the environment. An owner of the fourth physics will be an organic, inquisitive, and adaptable individual. Titled The Dogmatist, this placement holds a dogmatic perspective when addressing matters of logic. Dogmatic meaning, inclined to lay down principles as incontrovertibly true. In the system of Psychosophy, this type will be someone very stuck in their opinions. It is very difficult to change the first logic's mind. This produces either a knowledgeable sage or an ignorant blockhead. If the dogmatist believes they are knowledgeable about a topic, they will present their knowledge in a narrow, definitive way. In their answers, they will stray away from maybes and bouts of hesitation to avoid subjectivity. They seek absolute truth, and in this objectivity, they may be sensitive to stupidity and nonsense. When logic is met with the first function, it produces a character who is knowledgeable, rigid, and intellectually arrogant. Owners of the second logic will take a free and liberal approach when it comes to logic. They believe there is no thought not worth exploring and no idea unworthy of discussion. Named the rhetorician, this type has a love for questions and oppositional views because it promises the exchange of ideas, which the 2L values. Naturally, this type is known to be quite talkative. They are known to propose wild questions or play devil's advocate in the interest of opening conversation. Being in the second placement, second logic will encourage others in this aspect. This manifests as a passion for communication and debate. The 2L is not resultative. They don't seek anything long-term or complete, but momentary and broad enjoyment. Logic in the second function yields an individual who is playful, curious, and clever. The insecurity of the third logic presents as an inherent caution in their conclusions. Named the skeptic, 3L is both naive and distrustful. On one hand, they are easily swayed if the information is presented correctly. They're known to adapt to the opinions of eloquent speakers, owners of a PhD, or even a trusted loved one. Their core fear is being seen as a fool. 3L has difficulty structuring their knowledge. Consequently, the instability of the third placement begins to show itself. When they begin to lose an argument, they may act defensively. They aren't able to close an argument like the more flexible logic placements. They need a concrete answer, the truth. Logic intertwined with the fourth function will produce a character with non-negotiable, irrevocable, and weak opinions. Fourth logic is defined by its pragmatism. Independent cerebral labor is a drag if there's no need for it. They aren't the types to search for deeper meanings or ponder abstract mental frameworks. Again, the fourth placement is unbothered. They are easily swayed in their logic and usually don't obtain strong opinions. In a debate, they will modestly step back. They have nothing to prove in this aspect. Either they know or they don't know. Known as the schoolboy, they act as a student in which they ascertain information with the intention to pass. Just as a schoolboy doesn't seek knowledge outside of the curriculum, neither does the fourth logic. Because of this placement's indifference, they can be easy to logically sway. It's easier for them to adapt to any logical framework. You may find the fourth logic relying on a higher intellectual authority to form their decisions. 4L is not very interested in how opinions were formed and does not care to elaborate on its perspective. In all, fourth logic is grounded, uncurious, and down to earth. So now that we're about halfway done with the video, I wanted to stray away from descriptions and move on to my own personal takes on the system. Things such as giving my own personal advice on Psychosophy and how you should be typing yourself, my correlation list, and Q&A. In this section, I'll be breaking down any potential errors in typing, as well as how I personally believe you should be perceiving the system. Psychosophy is first and foremost your relationship with the aspect. How do you perceive it? You must understand that its descriptions aren't intended to describe the specific way the placement manifests, but how you view them. Manifestations are more of a factor when considering your whole Psychosophy type. You should be thinking less of the traits of each placement, but how the user views the aspect. For example, instead of seeing fourth emotion as its stereotypical traits such as its insensitivity, it'd be far more beneficial to think of 4E as someone who pays little attention to their emotional world. Instead of thinking of second logic as a contrarian and a curious intellectual, think of the placement as someone with a flexible but strong view of logic. Seeing placements as its traits can often lead to mistyping. These traits are often stereotypical and surface level. It's much better to think of the aspects in relation to the functions it's placed in. I see people failing to consider how each placement interacts with the other placements in your Psychosophy type. In the theory, its importance is downplayed. Yes, all placements are defined, but they all have different manifestations depending on the rest of your placements. Yes, all 3 Vs are 3 Vs, but third volition will manifest differently in types like FEVL and types like LFVE. Knowing how placements influence another adds a deeper level of understanding to the system. Another neglected part of Psychosophy is taking the time to consider each 4-letter type. I'm not necessarily saying you need to sit and read every type's description, though if you want, the descriptions are in the book. I'm just saying it's a good idea to perceive each 4-letter type as one whole type. I'm not telling you to disregard placements and functions. After all, they're the foundation of the system. Just find a balance between the 2 perceptions of the system. My motivation behind saying this in particular is to discourage such narrow views of the system. To expand on this, I see so many people blocking and fractionalizing each type without thinking of the type's nuance. VLFE isn't only 1V, 2L, 3F, and 4E. It's a type that's iconoclastic, driven, materialistic, and proficient in persuasion. Perceiving VLFE and the psychotypes as a complete type is crucial in gaining a better understanding of the system, as well as understanding the differences between other types. A huge annoying pain-in-the-butt topic in the typology community is the issue of correlations. While I couldn't possibly care less about socionics, I do want to weigh in slightly on my PY and Enneagram subtype correlations. But I really think we should find a middle ground between strict correlations and open-mindedness. However, this is easier said than done. My correlations may lean towards the stricter side, but I try my best to be open-minded. And before I give my correlations, feel free to comment on things you think I should have added, or any explanations of types I did add. Starting off with Heart Triad, Enneagram 2. SP2 goes with EFLV, FEVL, and FELV. Social 2 fits with VEFL and VELF. I've been open to 3V types such as LEVF and FEVL for Social 2. With LEVF, I don't know what I was thinking, and for FEVL, I think that it's iffy. I won't hang and quarter you for using it, but I've never been compelled to type a Social 2 as FEVL. And finally, Sexual 2 fits with FEVL and EFVL. SP3 fits with FVLE, VFLE, and LVFE. I've toyed with VLFE, but I've grown skeptical of it given SP3's rigidity and groundedness. To me, this contrasts with the second logic, which is anything but grounded and rigid. I see Social 2 as FLVE and maybe, possibly, probably FEVL. Sexual 3 fits with FEVL, FELV, and EFLV. For Enneagram 4, Conservation 4 pairs with any second volition, fourth logic type. Social 4 with types like ELVF and EVLF. Sexual 4 belongs to EVFL and ELVF. Now with Head Triad, Enneagram 5. SP5 goes with FLEV and LFEV only. Social 5 is troubling, because of course it fits with its archetype, LVEF. People are starting to suggest LVFE, but E5 is such an emotionally sensitive type. I find it hard to believe it fits with fourth emotion, which pays little attention to its emotional world. And as far as VLEF, a type that places itself at the top and focuses on self-assertion and dominance is unlikely to be a docile type like the E5. Sexual 5 is more flexible, fitting with types like LEVF, LEFV, and LFEV. For Enneagram 6, SP6 fits with LEFV and FELV. Social 6 goes with LVFE, LVEF, and LFVE. Sexual 6 only fits LVFE. This is probably my hottest correlation take, but Sexual 6 and Enneagram 6 in general is considered to be an intellectually rigid type, so I simply can't imagine it meshing with second logic. Wrapping up the Head Triad with Enneagram 7, SP7 fits with FLVE, FLEV, and VLFE. Social 7 is such a difficult type to compare to Psychosophy, but I see it as VLEF, VLFE, VELF, and EVLF, maybe. And Sexual 7 fits with the 2 first emotion and second logic types, such as ELFV and ELVF. Finally, the gut triad, starting with Enneagram 8, SP8 pairing with VFEL and VFLE. For social 8, I'm going with only VFLE. I've played around with FVLE for this type, but 2V is probably contradictory to the Enneagram 8 as a whole. Sexual 8 goes with FVLE and VFEL, but I do think EFVL is definitely worth considering. Transitioning to Enneagram 9, SP9 matches with FVEL and FLEV, Social 9 with FVLE and FELV, and Sexual 9 with FELV. And completing my correlations with Enneagram 1, SP1 with LVFE and EVFL, Social 1 belonging to VLFE, VFLE, LFVE, and LVFE. And finally with Sexual 1, I'm going with VFLE, and debatably VFEL and LFVE. With that concluded, I just want to clarify how thin my reasoning is when it comes to this kind of stuff. You could literally look at posts from a month ago and see me type characters that completely contradict with these stated correlations. Don't take my word as fact. Correlations are entirely up to interpretation. But the only reason I even consider the notion of correlations in the first place is because it only makes sense that two personality systems would contain some overlap, suggesting that some types fit better with each other than others. Again, if you have any issues with my list, let me know in the comments. This Q&A portion is made, of course, to answer your questions, but also because I'm hilariously awful at responding to comments that require using my brain. I do feel really bad. I'm afraid I appear narcissistic or vain, but this is certainly not the case. I just genuinely can't find the energy to respond to questions, partly because of my perfectionism. I want every response to be perfectly researched and explained. So I'll be placing a lot of questions asked in my comments as well as from TikTok posts and DMs into this part of the video. What is your typology? I find it hilarious that I've received several comments accurately typing me by my voice alone, but since this is a PY video, I type as FLEV. The rest of my typology and other systems is on screen. It's such a mouthful saying all of it, so there it is. What does an unhealthy 2V look like? So you've heard time and time again how much I butchered the description of the second volition. If asked this question back then, I might have answered, second volition may over-involve themselves in the matters of others. If asked this question back then, I might have answered, second volition may over-involve themselves in the matters of others. Yes, 2V will be others-focused, but this statement is extremely stereotypical. Although it could be true, it is a massive generalization of the type. Second will isn't much about your involvement in others' volitional spheres, as the stereotypes may suggest. Second volition is more about a balance in the volitional sphere. 2V is a diplomatic and balanced type that isn't caught in a hierarchical mindset like the other volitional placements. Because of their good nature, they are inclined to help others. People often ask the question of the manifestations of an unhealthy 2V. This question is simultaneously difficult and simple to answer. It's kind of like asking, what does a mentally unhealthy person with a lemon tree look like? Or what does a mentally unhealthy person that's left-handed look like? This just means that 2V will likely not be the reason an individual is unhealthy. A person with a lemon tree or someone that's left-handed strife will likely not be the result of having a lemon tree or being left-handed. 2V won't be the direct cause of any negative manifestations. It is very hard to give an exact answer for this. I could say second volition can cause the individual to be over-democratic and accommodating, which could prevent them from making harsh decisions. But this could apply for so many other placements in typology such as 4V, A, and Big 5, and literally every core type on the Enneagram. That's my take on this answer. I hear it a lot, so I hope I was able to provide some clarity. Do Psychosophy subtypes matter or not? If you aren't familiar with Psychosophy subtypes, basically they're subtypes of each placement, not the whole type. And for that reason alone, I see them as useless. But anyway, each placement will have a unique manifestation, like a 1F-4 will behave differently than a 1F-3. My answer to this question is purely based on my opinion. Use the subtypes or not, they can certainly add nuance to each placement, but I think they add unnecessarily complexity to an already complex system. I don't understand why we need subtypes for a system that already has 16 placements and 24 types. Take Enneagram, for example. The 9 core types work perfectly fine, but subtypes add an ultra-satisfying level of depth, especially on the foundation of already established instinctual variants. Enneagram subtypes are an almost flawless system. Psychosophy subtypes, on the other hand, seem to just be adding numbers to each placement, and I can see it potentially alienating new people trying to learn the system. I understand that most placements are broad in their manifestations, but dare I say they should be broad. To me, again, as I've said multiple times, PY is about how you view the aspects. It's very internal. I see no reason to narrow and create subtypes to focus on behavior. How 3E might actually manifest, plus some tells. I remember in one of your videos you say it's the hardest to see. Obviously the other placements may impact this too. Great question. First of all, I don't know why I said it's the hardest to see. It's actually the easiest to spot among the emotional placements. But third emotional manifests as an insecurity in engaging in emotional experiences. So, this will likely appear as someone who's emotionally rigid, meaning a very sharp, avoidant reaction to emotionality. Rigidity can appear in the face as a reluctance to smile or laugh. They may downplay their pain or joy. You can distinguish third emotion by noticing an attention or interest in the emotional sphere, but an inability to express it. Third emotion types can be quite energetic and vibrant, like some FLEV, VLEF, and VFELs, but what I notice is that they still remain quite dry. And what all 3Es have in common is an avoidance of true, unfiltered emotion. This person said, "What are your controversial typings? I want to know." I remember this comment from about 8 months ago, but I never got around to thinking hard about it. But from a list I've made, the controversial typings I will die hard for are Shiv Roy, SP7 VLFE, Beth Harmon, LFEV, Homelander Sexual 2 FEVL, Rick Grimes SP3 FVLE, and Rick Sanchez SP8 VFEL. But I've been introduced to some new typings that definitely break the norm. Aaron Yeager, Social 8, VFLE, Katara, Social 2, VELF, and Kilua Zoldyck, SP7, FLEV. This person says, "Hey, I know it's a late comment, but since I think I fit under EVLF, could you go under which Enneatypes / Socionics would likely correlate with this PY? Been kinda unsure for a good while now, and you seem to have one of the best graphs of typology I've seen. First of all, thanks. And secondly, I could just pull from my correlation list and give you the answer, but that'd be lazy and unproductive. So I'll start off with giving a brief description of EVLF. First emotion causes them to be sincere and sensitive to the pain of others. Their second will leads them to be balanced, altruistic, and to hold a belief in the common good. While I can't speak for socionics because I'm uneducated, in Enneagram, people usually pair EVLF with the social 4 and 7. And I see the social 4 as the only plausible combination. Social 7 doesn't work for me. EVLF is simply too genuine, balanced, and anti-hierarchical. Social 7 uses goodwill as a facade, and EVLF is truly altruistic. The social E7 is also someone who needs to see themselves as grand, and I just simply can't see this fitting with this specific psychotype. Do you have something to discuss about PY clubs? If you aren't familiar, Psychosophy clubs are a branch of PY that takes the first 2 letters of your type and generalizes how all types with the same 2 letters will manifest. For example, the type VELF will be a part of the VE or EV club, along with types like EVLF, EVFL, and VEFL. And as far as my opinion goes, I don't really care. I'm pretty indifferent to it. It is an unofficial theory. There's a limit to how much you can learn. I'm pretty sure there's only one page on the entire internet that discusses it. The theory was pretty interesting, but again, I believe Psychosophy is already complicated enough. PY clubs have never helped me with typing, but if you believe they'll help you, I'll link the page in the description. And so the final question asks 4 questions. Number 1 says, I would just like to see your opinion on how to accurately type someone using PY, as well as what to look for in yourself. To answer this, remember that volition is the most important aspect to look out for. Starting with your volitional placement and working from there is the best way to do it. If you're stuck between any type, avoid stereotypes. Be skeptical of any information other than from syntax of love. In typing yourself and others, rely less on behavior and try to gauge how they perceive the aspect. Find whether Johnny sees volition as his source of power, or is he just domineering and authoritative. And then they ask, what are your thoughts on correlations with PY and Enneagram? For example, can 4F be SP dominant? I've already given my correlation list, and I do not see a possible correlation between fourth physics and the self-preservation instinct. The SP instinct doesn't just determine how your Enneagram manifests. Instinctual variants are a typing system in and of itself. Any and every type that is self-preservation dominant will prioritize material supplies, security, and physical satisfaction. To me, this completely contradicts with the fourth physics. And then you asked, I was also thinking about how 1F and 1V can seem similar. 1F can seem like they are overly controlling in the physical world and confident in their material possessions, which could come across as someone possessive, aggressive, and dominant, which could cause some confusion with the 1V. To narrow in on the part where you said 1F can seem aggressive and dominant, no, not necessarily. If influenced by another placement, like third volition possibly, but alone, 1F won't be especially 1V presenting. To try to place myself in your mind, I assume you're asking if because of the fact that first physics is confident in their bodies, and the body being the conduit of perception, will they appear as confident in general, making them look like first will. This presents a very interesting question about the misconception of first physics. Being 1F doesn't necessarily mean you're comfortable in your body. Any physics placement can be physically insecure. First physics is just a type that is overconfident in the decisions made about the body and the physical environment. First physics isn't what will make someone confident externally. Into your last question asking what are the differences between 2L and 4L. This is a valid question. Second and fourth logic are both flexible and others focused. They both strive not so much to form their own opinion on any issue, but to support or change someone else's. But the difference between the two is that one is strong and conscious and the other one is weak and unconscious. This means that second logic will pay a larger attention to the logic aspect as a whole, as opposed to the fourth logic, which will often ignore it. In behavior, they can both seem loose and relaxed in arguments. 2L will provoke others through reflection and discussion. Fourth logic won't bother.